I do not even know where to begin today. I almost didn't get this episode out because I had a little bit of an emergency here at the household. Actually, not really, but if I had listened to the message that I received from the IRS about a pending lawsuit and that I needed to call back immediately to resolve the issue, or I should say, if I had believed that message, perhaps it would have actually been an emergency or crisis at the house. However, I've received those calls before. I've gone online and I've Googled the numbers, and it almost immediately comes back as a scam website or a scam phone number. But what I've never done is actually call the number back. So that's what I did this morning, because for whatever reason, they called me twice. And it blows my mind that people fall for it. I think to the vast majority of people who would receive a call or even hear a message like that, it would ring as if something was off, which it certainly did for me, and it has every time in the past. But they're obviously doing it because somebody is falling for it and they're making money. So I had a little bit of extra time this morning and I said, screw it. I'm going to call these people and, maybe play with them a little bit, see what these calls sound like. And I would say it took 1 second for me to realize, and hopefully it would take no longer than that for anybody else to realize that it is obviously a scam. But like I said, I had a little bit of time on my hands, so I had some fun with it. And then I also realized that I had a recording device right next to my phone, so I threw it on speaker and moved the microphone nearby. And yeah, this is what it's going to sound like if you call one of those internet scammers back.
Investigation Department with the Internal Revenue Service. How can I help you?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Andy Stumpf. I received a phone call message saying that there was a potential lawsuit with my name attached to it, and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, this is Officer Jack Peterson from the Crime Investigation Department with the Internal Revenue Service. And my badge ID number is IOM 55291. So may I have your first name and last name, sir?
My first name and last name is Andrew Stumpf.
So, Mr. Trump,
Yes.
Sam, that we call you to ascertain your attorney's information that there are some legal allegations and a lawsuit has been filed against your name with the Internal Revenue Service. So, are you aware about the situation?
No, that's why I'm calling. This is the first I've ever heard about this. What exactly is the lawsuit?
Okay, I can explain you regarding this matter, but before I go ahead for the further information, do you have a piece of pen and paper with you handy?
Yes, I do.
All right. Just write it down, the case file number. That is C as in Charlie, F as in Frank, N as in Nancy, dash 1049.
Okay.
That is the case file number. And there is a warrant docket number is 63-9976.
Okay.
All right. So, Mr. Stum, that the line which you are talking with me right now, this call has been recorded and being monitored with the IRS headquarters of the Washington, D.C., and as well as to the local county sheriff department. Each and every conversation is being recorded and being monitored. So be careful whatever you are speaking on this line.
Okay.
All right? So now I'm going to affidavit of your records, but before I'm going to do that, you don't need to interrupt me. Once I'm done on the time, I will give you a fair enough time to speak. All right?
Sounds good.
Okay. So, Mr. Sam, that we have received some petition against your name. That is, audit department has randomly conducted an audit on your taxes file of the years of 2012 to 2016, and they have found out that there is some miscalculations error on your taxes file. That your tax file doesn't match the tax record which you have. So according to the section 101, that amount is still outstanding under your name that you have not paid. For that reason, the local authorities would come down to arrest you. So your driver license will be cancelled, like your bank accounts and your property will be seized. And you will also face the federal imprisonment up to 5 years. And now that IRS is placing a 4 serious allegations under your name, that is count 1, the violation of federal tax regulations, and count 2, the violation of Internal Revenue Code, and count 3, theft by deception, and count 4, willful misrepresentation to the information to the government organization. Now, the total outstanding amount is under your name, that is $3,971, which includes your pending taxes, legal charges, and late fees. So, Mr. Sam, that did you done this fraud with the Internal Revenue Service is an intentionally or was it by honest mistake?
I mean, I pay my taxes every single year, so I don't understand what could have possibly gone wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Are you filing your income tax by yourself or with the help of the accountants or CPA?
I use the help of an accountant.
All right. But Mr. Stam, that let me explain you regarding this matter that IRS is never ever tell you to hire an accountant or CPA, whoever file your taxes. So whatever they mistaken you, that you are only the liable concerned person to take care of their mistake.
So I don't understand what you're saying.
Yes, I'm saying that you are filing your taxes each and every year properly, but not with the appropriate amount. That's the reason that miscalculations has been found under your tax file. It doesn't match the tax account which you have. The amount is goes of $3,971, which includes your pending taxes, legal charges, and late fees.
I mean, I think I understand that. I don't understand why the police would come to our house. I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, I consider myself to be a free-range American, and I don't believe in the power granted to the police by an illegal government.
All right.
I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to send police to the house. I'd have to fight them. I have no choice.
All right. But the reason is that, Mr. Stam, that we have sent you the 2 legal documentations to your home mailing address. The post letter was sent to you on 17th August 2017. And second was on 28th of August 2017. So according to our records, the one of the IRS officer, he had been personally to your doorstep. He is an officer, Jason Brown. All right. But on the time, there were no one is available to receive all the documentations at your house. That's the reason that all the paperwork is returned back to the IRS headquarters in the Washington, D.C. And now that IRS is believed that you are trying to running away from the situation and trying to defraud with the Internal Revenue Service. That's the reason that there is a non-available legal arrest warrant is being issued under your name. So before we are taken down to the custody, before we start with the legal procedures against you, we are just given a last notifications call today that to make you aware regarding this matter, that have you done this intentionally with the fraud or was it by honest mistake?
I mean, I don't think I've ever committed fraud, so it would have had to have been a mistake.
All right. So, like I said, over this recorded line conversations that you are saying that is a mistake. So, not a problem with that. So, that's why we are just giving you a notifications call today. This is the last notifications call which you are receiving today before we start with the legal procedures against you, Mrs. Tam.
Okay.
So now, what's your intention regarding this matter? So, do you have any criminal attorney which you can represent in the courthouse, inside the court, on the behalf of you?
I don't. Like I said, I don't really believe in the power of the police or the power of laws. So I kind of avoid all attorneys, and I actually don't know anything about the law, even though I don't believe in it.
Yes, because the reason is that we have already sent it through legal documentation, but we never respond with the letters with the certified mail. That's the reason that we assume that you are trying to running away from the situations, Mr. Sam. But you haven't informed that you haven't moved from this address.
Well, I don't believe in running. I think you should stand and fight. I think that people who run long distances are cowards, except for Cameron Haynes. So I don't know what you want me to do.
So now that Mr. Stam, that you are saying over the recorded line conversations that is a mistake, then right now that you have two options, either you can go for the legal matter to fight this case inside the courthouse against the IRS, or else you can rectify your mistake outside of the courthouse.
I mean, like I said, I don't really believe in the laws or the police or the government, so how could we do this without going into a courthouse?
So if you happen with intention, yes. If you want to go to the courthouse, then we don't have any problem with that, but you need to be hired on one criminal attorney, which you can represent to the courthouse inside on the behalf of you. But make sure that if you win this case inside the courthouse, then that will be fine for you. But IRS has a strong evidence to make you believe inside the courthouse that where you have done a mistake and how you done a mistake. Because it's already written in the paperwork, but you haven't received all the documentations, and you never respond us back. That's the reason that we assume that you are trying to running away. But make sure that if you lose this case inside the courthouse, then IRS will sue you more than $70,000 or $75,000. Where you have to become up in a week. If you are unable to become up in a week, then this case will be retained, and you will be faced the federal imprisonment up to 5 years in jail.
Well, I definitely don't want to do that. I don't want my kids to grow up wondering who their dad is. So what can we do to fix this?
All right, then over this recorded line conversations, that if you have a good intention, then you can still to talk with my higher authority, and let's see if there's something gonna be work out. All right, just stay on the line with me. Let me transfer your call to my higher authority. All right?
Okay.
Be on hold.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you for holding the line. This is Officer Melvin Johnson from the Restitution Department. Am I talking with Andrew?
Yes,
Yes, Andrew. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Melvin?
Yes, I'm good. Well, Andrew, your call has been transferred to me stating that you haven't done this tax fraud intentionally.
Correct.
What is the matter?
What do you mean?
The Internal Revenue Service has tried to send you the letters.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was trying to tell Officer Peterson I don't really believe in mail. I mean, we have a mailbox, but I don't ever check it.
So it was a confidential letter, Andrew.
Does
It
that
has to be signed.
does that mean- does that mean? See, I never saw it. I mean, I never checked the mail. I mean, I think we have a mailbox, but I never go out there.
So you never go out there. So that's not our mistake, right? Because the department started assuming that you're trying to run away with the situation.
Okay.
And today there is a lawsuit filed against him, and there is an arrest warrant against you, Andrew.
Well, like I was telling the other officer, I don't think you guys should send the police to the house. I mean, I think that they have an illegal power granted to them from the government, and if they come to the house, I think darkness would descend upon them.
So what do you want to do? You don't want yourself to get arrested? That's what you're trying to say to me?
Oh, I would never be taken alive. I would have to fight them.
Okay. So now, at this point of time, okay, do you have any attorney or a lawyer, Andrew?
No, like I was telling the other officer. No, I was telling the other officer as well. Like, I don't really know much about the law, but I don't believe in it, so I avoid lawyers like the plague. I don't like them.
Okay, you don't like them. So do you have any more questions before we issue the arrest warrant and start with the legal proceedings against you?
I mean, I was under the impression that there was a way that the other officer, Officer Peterson, said there's a way we could handle it outside of the court.
Yes, it's with me because I'm the decision maker for your case because I'm handling your case.
Okay. What options do I have?
You don't have any options at this point of time right now, Andrew, because the department started assuming that you're trying to avoid the situation, as I already told you.
So I
Your
have.
call was been transferred to me stating that to resolve this matter and rectify this matter, as you don't want yourself to get arrested.
Yeah. No. So how do I do those things? How do I solve the problem and rectify the matter?
Well, at this point of time, your all payment options have been closed.
Well, that's a bummer. So I can't even pay the fee?
No, sir. Your all payment options have been closed because your bank accounts are also under the IRS radar. They will be freeze.
Oh, so
Under the Act of 63318, the Internal Revenue Service has the legal rights to freeze your accounts.
so you're saying I should transfer the money out of them now?
No, sir. Your bank accounts will be freeze.
They'll be freeze or they'll be froze?
You won't be able. They will be freeze. They will be froze.
Okay.
They will be seized.
They'll be seized. Oh, okay. What should I tell my wife when that happens? What would you tell?
You can tell your wife because there is a lawsuit.
Well, what would you tell your wife?
There was a lawsuit filed against me. I would tell my wife. Why would I tell my wife, by the way?
No, if this were to happen to you, I'm trying to figure out. I mean, I don't really believe in money either. I mean, I think that Bitcoin is the way of the future as it is. So, I mean, that the imaginary ones and zeros in the bank account don't do much to me. But how would you explain it to your wife if you were in my situation?
Let me tell you, first of all, Andrew, you have done the mistakes, okay? You have tried to cheat the federal government of the United States.
I don't believe in the government of the United States. I think that they violate our Bill of Freedom and the Articles of Incorporation from the Boston Tea Party.
So what do you want from me, by the way, Andrew?
I would like for you to go fuck yourself.
Okay. So what you can do, you can wait for the officer to come at your place, okay?
Yes, I will be waiting.
Fuck yourself.
I will stand outside currently. I'm standing outside now.
You're trying to disrespect me and my job. Okay, you can do that, okay? And wait for the officer over there.
Yes,
The
will
company
it
will try to reach you.
will it be soon?
You can look at the paperwork, all the documentation.
Is the
Yes, sir.
officer coming
They
now?
will
Because
try
I'm
to-
getting excited.
Okay, you can wait for the officer's call. It might take 2 to 3 hours, okay? You can be in the house wherever
2 to
you are.
3
They will
hours?
try to
Come
reach you.
on. There's not that much stuff going on. You guys are the IRS. Your calls are important, right?
It is as per the protocol and as per the rules and the regulations. Okay? Of the United States. You have a good day. Bye-bye, Andrew.
Okay. Now that it's been determined that I am a deviant and fugitive from justice and that the police will likely be at my house in 2 to 3 hours, let's dig in. Episode 22, coming at you.
Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun run, north to south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
I'm going to start this week by saying I should have answered this question a long time ago. There are some repeating themes that come up week after week. This one is certainly one. And again, I have been remiss for not answering this. And it is about my bow setup. And then my bow practice, and then a little bit of questions, a few questions actually, about hunting. So before I get into any of this, if any of you have been following along, I really got into the bow stuff basically in August of this year. I had the bow for maybe 8 months before that, but I had had no training, and I actually hadn't put much thought into hunting or pursuing it beyond shooting in my backyard. But then I met some amazing people through some introductions of some good friends, and it kind of changed for me. I went from shooting in the backyard to taking it much more seriously, to taking the backyard practice and actually applying it in the field and hunting with my bow for the first time. The whole point of me saying all of that is that I may say something wrong when it comes to bow stuff. I don't know what I might do. I'm not an expert is what I'm trying to say. A very long-winded way to get to the point of I'm not an expert, but I'll do the best that I can. So when it comes to my bow setup, and actually one of the questions I get asked is why do I shoot a Hoyt bow? So the bow that I shoot is a Hoyt Carbon Defiant. I believe it was made in 2016, and the size of my bow is a 31 axle to axle. I chose Hoyt, or I shoot Hoyt, because of a recommendation from Joe. I hit him up about bow hunting, and he told me what he shot, and if he had shot Matthews or any of these other brands, and I'm sure all of the top tier brands have similar levels of quality, if I had gotten that recommendation, I probably would have gone down that road. But the recommendation that I got was to go with Hoyt, and that is what I have done. And I've loved it. I absolutely love the bow. Since then, I have picked up some of the other brands. Nothing negative to say about any of the other brands because, like I said, I don't have enough experience to make any judgment about that. But I really like the way the Hoyt feels in my hand, and I have practiced with it every single day pretty much since I've gotten it. So that's the direction I am going to be staying. Get serious, get Hoyt. That's what they say. It's not what I say. It's what they say. I'm sitting here holding the bow in my hand right now, taking a look at the strings. Dudley ordered me some custom colors. He ordered me red and blue, but they're not custom. They are actually Hoyt strings because that's where it says get serious, get Hoyt right on the string. I'm shooting a Fuse stabilizer. I have absolutely no idea how long that stabilizer is or how heavy it is, but it has an awesome quick disconnect, so I can take the thing off and put it in my travel bag. Straight up from the stabilizer, I'm looking at the Elevate Rest that I shoot, which comes from John Dudley. You can get them at the knockonarchery.com store. Straight up from that, I am shooting a Fast Eddie Spot Hog single. I want to say it's got one, what I would call a shark fin coming up, but it has 2 pins. So since it only has 1 blade, I don't know if it'd be considered a single pin or not. I don't know. But it's got 1 vertical blade coming up from the bottom, and it's got 2 pins. So right now, when my sight is dialed to 20 for my top pin, the bottom pin is sitting just beyond 35, so like 35 and a half. So it gives me the opportunity to have at least 2 distances dialed. The Spot Hog is adjustable for both windage and elevation and distance. And then in addition to that, I shoot an Easton 4-arrow quiver. Thank you very much, Evan. Thing matches with the bow perfectly. And that's about it for the bow itself. I'm looking at this thing. I don't think I left anything else. Oh, I did leave one thing out. I have a pair of knock-on grips that Dudley hooked me up with after I had a bad experience in Utah. I think he was trying to give me some good juju. So these grips are actually made out of a bull elk antler that he killed on September 11th. And I really like them. For one, they look awesome, but I actually really like how my hand feels on the bone. I feel like it absorbs a little bit of moisture. So if my hand is sweating at all, it actually feels much more stable sitting right there between my thumb and my index finger. But that's it. That's the bow setup in and of itself. And then as far as the arrows go, I shoot an Easton 5mm full metal jacket, 28-inch arrow with the AAE Max vanes in the back with a nocturnal lit nock. And so far, the only arrows that the only broadheads that I've put anything on the ground with have been either the Rage Hypodermic and the Rage Trypan. I do have some fixed blade arrow broadheads, but I have yet to actually take them out into the wild. As far as my releases, I switch back and forth between 2. I've hunted with both and I practice with both, but they are the Silverback and the Noctuit, both of them from Nock On Archery. I might mess this up. The concept of their use is the same. One has a safety that you hold as you pull back until you anchor, and then you fire with back tension. Which is the Silverback. The Noctuit actually clips to your D-loop, which is why I have hunted a little bit more now with the Noctuit. I'm probably not as good of a shot with the Noctuit, but I like the fact that I can hang it from my D-loop and I don't have to grab it out of my pocket. But you clip it onto your D-loop, and when you get to your anchor position, You can then rotate your thumb around. I'm pretty sure it's a trigger, but basically it's a knob that your thumb rests on, and then I try to attempt to fire it with the same back pressure. I don't actually use my thumb to fire it. I just continue pulling with the same muscles that I do with the silverback, which is why I switch back and forth with it pretty much every day that I practice, which is days that end in Y. I'm out at least shooting a little bit, so I might as well dive into that because one of the next questions was, how often do I practice? And I try to practice every single day. Some days I shoot lots of arrows, and some days I shoot maybe 2 dozen. Today I was out there, and I think I had 5 arrows that I took out there with me. I think I shot them 3 times from a close distance. I was at 20 yards. I was looking at a bag, not trying to aim at any spot on the bag. The only thing that I was thinking of or was trying to reinforce was the solid mechanics that John taught me. And specifically what I mean with that is before I do anything, I try to line up my stance. I keep my left arm straight and raise the bow up in the direction of the target that I'm going to be shooting at. I pull back, I take my time, and I get into my anchored position, trying to really keep my right elbow back and high. I slowly lower my nose down until it contacts the string of the bow, and I look through the peep. And once I have my sight alignment the way that I want it to be, the only thing I think about is holding everything that I have the way that it is and firing the bow. I don't actually think about firing the bow. I just tell myself in my head, pull, 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 pull. I literally say that in my head every single time, and I try to get it to fire somewhere between 2 to 4 seconds after I start telling myself that. I don't want it to go off immediately, and I've found that if I get around the 6 to 8 second mark, I'm generally holding my breath by that time period, and my vision starts to go, and I'll actually notice that my head is moving away from the peep, and I wouldn't even call it less accurate. It becomes a Hail Mary at that point. So I focus on today was purely fundamentals. I was just kind of moving the sight around a little bit so I wouldn't hit the other arrows that were in the bag. Shot 15 of them, had really good shot sequencing. The timing was good on the release, and I just called it a day. But what I did add to today's practice is I was wearing gloves and I was wearing a bulky jacket because I'm going to France with John here in about 10 days, and we will most definitely be in jackets, and I'm assuming we're going to be in gloves, even though I have not shot much in gloves. And if I had the time to do it, I probably would take them off before attempting a shot, but I want to be able to make a shot if I need to. So for the last week, actually, if not more, regardless of the temperature, I've been in the backyard shooting with those gloves on, and I'm actually going to California here on Saturday. I'm taking my bow, and I'll be shooting when I'm out there, and I'll be wearing gloves out there as well. I'm a huge believer in practicing like you're going to play. If you're going to need to be wearing bulky clothes, I don't want to figure out for the first time out there as I try to pull my bow back that I can't because the zipper got in the way or whatever it may be. I'm not a fan of surprises when it comes to that stuff, so I try to practice like I play. I practice distance shooting sometimes. Sometimes I'll shoot at the 3D target. Sometimes I'll shoot at the block. I had just did my first hunting trip where I was actually in a stand, and I had never really practiced from a seated position, so I've definitely incorporated that because it was a little bit odd, especially just basically cutting out my lower body at the torso and expecting to be able to pull back and get everything to feel the way that it had when I was standing. It's a little bit of an adjustment for me, so I've added that. I've added a little bit of kneeling, and that's about it. But I'm out there every single day making sure that I'm getting the reps in. Nothing I hate more than taking a long time period off and picking up any activity and it just doesn't feel right. I'm not a fan of that, so I try to keep my currency as high level as it can possibly be. Second and third questions follow along a little bit in the hunting theme, so I'm just going to stack them up. Second one was, what is my favorite shoe for the sandbox, which is a term a lot of military guys will use for the desert overseas, whether Afghanistan or Iraq. And for myself, I think probably my first few deployments, I was wearing a boot that had been issued of some kind. That was likely all the way like mid-calf. So full military boot. It probably had a steel toe for all I remember. But as soon as I had the opportunity to do so, I got rid of that thing because ounces are pounds, and those pounds make a difference when you're walking all night long. And I tried a variety of shoes, and what I settled on and used the most often was actually a low top Salomon shoe. Specifically, I liked the Speedcross shoes or the XA Pros. And I would take 3 to 4 pair of those shoes on every deployment, knowing that I was going to burn through them and I could maybe get 2 months out of a pair of shoes, really depending on the terrain that we were walking in. Flat ground and just sand and dirt, not a problem. But any type of shale rock that had sharp edges to it, it just tears those things to pieces. But they were so light and still provided cushion and a little bit of enough stability at that point that I was willing to spend the money on it for the trade-off. Because at that point in my career, if I could shave 2 ounces off, I would absolutely shave 2 ounces. So those are the two versions of the low top shoes that I would wear. The Salomons, I'm sure there's some other shoes that are comparative in quality. They're relatively expensive for a shoe like that. You can get them in Gore-Tex if you're interested in waterproofing. Just be careful that when you sweat, that waterproofing is going to also make your foot a lot hotter. And the waterproof ones the Gore-Tex ones will be a little bit more expensive, but they got some options. And then if we were going to go do anything that was crazy vertical or crazy mountainous, I would switch actually again to another version of the Salomon, and I would go with a half shank or a 3/4 shank, meaning how far actually it goes up over your ankle. And the shoe or the boot at this point that I would use the most often was the Salomon X Ultra Trek. And again, these are just examples of similar shoes that I would use. If you're looking for something good for those types of environments, give them a try. Regardless of whatever shoe it is you're going to take, if you're using this for a military purpose, do yourself a favor and order a pair well before you're actually going to go on deployment, not like 3 weeks before and rush it and then get it in the box and throw it in a bag and take it overseas. Spend some time figuring out if it's actually going to work for the task at hand. Now, the hunting side of the house, because this person asked about hunting as well, I have been using the Under Armour Infill Ops boot. And I actually made what I would consider to be a mistake when I first ordered these. And I'm pretty sure that I ordered 2 versions of the Infill Ops. I may be speaking a little bit out of school here. The first pair that I got, though, went higher up on my calf. It was a fuller shank up the lower leg. And I don't do very well with that. For whatever reason, my body type, if I wear that type of boot, I seem to blister like nobody's business. But if I just reduce that shank height a little bit, which is what I'm using now on the Infill Ops, it's probably a half shank at most. I get all the stability that I need for my ankles, but I don't get any rubbing on my Achilles tendon, and for whatever reason, my heel stays in the cup a little bit better. And that's what I've been going with. Now for France, those boots, the Infill Ops, they wouldn't work. And I don't think that they would claim that they would work. So I actually went back and found a pair of Salomons, Gore-Tex 3/4 ankle protection, and I'm taking those bad boys over, and they're going to work great. I actually hiked with them last year up here in Montana in the snow, kept my foot warm, totally waterproof, not incredibly heavy. You definitely will feel them at the end of the day, depending on how steep the terrain is. And if you're just making a lot of steps where your knee is coming higher than your hip, whether that be going over a rock or climbing up not a sheer, but a steep face, or lifting your leg up over a log, that's really where those ounces become pounds, and it's going to make a difference on your hip flexors and your lower back at the end of the day. I don't know how much climbing we're going to be doing, but I'm comfortable with that boot. And a point that I think should be made, the boot is one important aspect of the footwear you're going to select. In addition to that, if you don't pick the right sock, your life is going to be utterly miserable. There is nothing worse than starting a long hike or a long trek or a long infill and realizing 1/10 of the way through that you already have a hot spot on your foot, meaning the building of a blister. And I'm sure we all do the same thing. I'm like, oh yeah, that's going to be fun. I'm sure it's going to be okay. Yeah, it's not. Your life is just going to be utterly miserable later on in the evening or the day, whichever it may be. So pick a good sock. If you choose cotton, you're out of your mind. It's 2017, like 30 some days from 2018. The technology is out there. Avoid cotton like it's a contagious disease when it comes to socks, and pick something that wears well, gives you a little bit of cushion, and provides you the protection that you need from a thermal perspective. All right, question number 3. Any advice for learning how to spot and stalk hunt? So if you are not a hunter or you have never hunted before, you're probably going to have no idea what that means. So in layman's terms, that means you are locating, probably from a distance. In this case, obviously, if it's hunting, it's an animal, and sneaking into a position where you can actually take a shot. I obviously am a bow hunter, and for me, or I would say probably for most bow hunters, maybe 60 to 80 yards is the far, far outside window of what you would consider to be ethical. I think that depends on the individual. Actually, it 100% depends on the individual. Just because somebody can shoot at 100 yards doesn't mean that you should. Maybe your max ethical distance is 30 to 40 yards, and that has to be respected, and that you need to know where that is for yourself. But if you see an animal and you want to maneuver to that position, you can have a long road to hoe in front of you. So my advice for learning how to do that is to find someone to either teach you or find somebody to guide you. You know, maybe go with somebody on a hunt where you have, this is going to be interesting too. I don't know how hunters would accept this, because even if you're not hunting, you have the ability to blow somebody else's hunt by either making noise or moving at the wrong time period. So if you could find somebody that would take you on a hunt and just leave all of your hunting stuff, meaning any weaponry, whether it's a rifle or a bow, leave that in the car or at your house and just practice on moving through the woods and watching how other people move through the woods or through uneven terrain, I think that would be a good thing. If you can't do that, if you can't find a mentor or somebody to go along with, I would recommend that you go out and practice, or just go out and hunt and expect to get busted. Just expect to get seen, expect to have mistakes made. You know, in the bow hunting world, especially, the wind is going to be an issue as well. So you could have the best stock in the world going on and the wind could shift and the animal is going to bust you. Just expect for those things to happen, and you could be the best spot and stalker in the world and the wind could shift and that could happen. So don't sweat it too much if it does. But get out there and do the best you can. Try, give it your best effort, and just learn from the mistakes that you are absolutely going to make. As far as moving itself, really the only advice I can give you is don't only look at the ground right in front of you. And with that, try not to look at the ground too much, because if you do, you're going to miss everything. You're going to end up in bad spots, and you're going to end up probably backtracking quite a bit. It's a fine balance between what's right in front of your feet and where it is you need to go and where the animal is in relationship to those two things. I would look for dead space. I know I've talked about this before. I actually think with Dudley, but think of dead space as finding an object that you can put between the animal and you that will allow you to move, I'm not going to say freely, but more efficiently than crawling on your stomach. It could be a big tree. Maybe it could be a ridge line you could maneuver left or right to put in between you, and then you could just walk. Whatever it is, try to put something in between the animal and where it is that you're trying to go. It'll make your life a lot easier when it comes to moving. Take your time to look at the terrain. I always try to look from near to far, and then I, give it a second, clear my head a little bit, and then I look from far to near, and I also look left to right. And I try to plan my movement before I ever take a step. And this is a constantly resetting cycle. I'll move 5 feet and then reassess where I'm at and decide what the next best steps will be. Not the next best step. You need to add multiple steps along the way. You need to play a little bit of chess with this. It's not checkers if you want to be successful in the long run. What I have found, and I learned how to do spot and stalk stuff in a non-hunting environment. I learned how to do it at sniper school. And my initial reaction every single time when they said go, because they would give us a left and right boundary and a rough distance of where the observers were that we needed to sneak up to within, I think it was 200, 280 yards, something like that. It might have been closer. It was a 20-yard window, though. The initial reaction was to rush and just to take off, and I got busted. So I stopped doing that, and I would spend more time when they said go, turning around, observing the terrain, figuring out where I wanted to get, and then looking at the terrain in relationship to that to try to strategize my maneuvers. What's really going to help once you have that strategy going is keeping your head up. Like I said, obviously look at the ground enough to make sure you're not stepping on, dry sticks and tripping all over everything. But if you only look straight down you're only going to see straight down. The animal that you've been dreaming of your entire life could run across, 20 feet in front of you, and you're not going to be ready because you're focused on the ground in front of you. Something Dudley was talking to me about was taking your shoes off. And this is something that I have done right before. I don't know. I may or may not have missed 2 shots back to back. But hey, I was definitely quiet right before I missed those 2 shots. But if you really want to be sneaky, you're going to need to take off the boots, especially if they're heavy boots and you don't have any tactile sensation in your feet. Throw some socks. Well, hopefully you have socks on. My God, who's hunting barefoot in their boots? But I actually think Dudley carries an extra set of socks. Probably has an extra set of everything. Get down to your socks. You're going to be able to feel the ground a lot better. Are your feet going to get punished for it? Yeah, probably, depending on how far you have to go. But you're going to be much more quiet and much more efficient in your movement. Use the terrain. Try not to fight it. There's some great hunting apps that I have seen out there. I think I have 3 or 4 on my phone right now. Some of them provide topographical maps. Most of them provide satellite imagery. Study that stuff. I mean, if they're going to give you a partial answer to the test before you move, the smart person is going to take a look at that answer key and try to put everything in their favor. Terrain lines are a great thing to look at. You can tell the steepness of the terrain, and you might be able to figure out a way, although it might not be straight at the animal that you're looking to hunt, you may be able to move a little bit farther, but much more quietly and out of the line of sight. And at the end of the day, you're going to be much more refreshed. Because I can tell you right now, the worst type of movement ever is crawling on your face an inch at a time. It is exhausting, and you will be so sore the next day. Last 2 things I can say are if you find yourself in a bad position, and this happened to me often in sniper school, where I would think that I was going to pop my head up and I was going to be in a great spot, and I realized that I wasn't, or maybe the dead space, the tree that I was using provided great dead space when I was at a distance, but the closer that I got, I was going to be seen by the observers. The tendency is to try to want to force it because you've put so much time and effort into getting to that spot. And I would recommend absolutely fighting that tendency and fighting that feeling and just retrace your steps and find a better location. And the last thing I can recommend when it comes to anything hunting related, spot and stock, gear, bow setup, arrow setup, tuning, all of that stuff, practice. Practice with all your gear. So if you're going to go practice a spot and stock in the woods, take your stuff so you know what it sounds like moving around with the backpack. Take and put everything in there as well too. Don't just take a backpack and have it empty. Put the things in there that you're actually going to hunt with and go out into the field and see what it's like. And break your boots in and get blisters and figure out what doesn't work and realize that the inseam that you have on your pants is 2 inches too short or 2 inches too long, and make those adjustments before game time comes around for next year. The best resource I can point anybody at when it comes to hunting, especially bow hunting, is John's podcast, Knock On. It's in the iTunes store or wherever you guys can find podcasts. It's my absolute go-to reference. Every time he throws up a new episode, I'm listening to that thing and I'm taking notes and then generally harassing him via text afterwards with questions. All right, question number 4. And this is another one that I should have answered many, many podcasts ago because every time I ask for questions or solicit for questions, this one seems to come up, and it is, why did we move from California to Montana? And inside of that question, what are some of my favorite aspects, and why Montana over the other states? We, my wife and my 3 kids, probably me and my wife more than my 3 kids, thought a lot about the move out of California for a really long time. We looked at basically every neighboring state to California. We looked really hard at Idaho. We looked at Nevada. We looked at Colorado. We looked at Oregon. We looked at Washington State. And there was a couple things that drew us back to Montana every single time. There were small things, but in the grand scale, I think they made the biggest difference. The first one is that my wife was born and raised in Montana. So that was a huge contributing factor. She was born and raised in Great Falls, which I don't think I've ever been to, but to my understanding, it's about 300 miles east of where we live now, getting out into the end of the mountains and the beginning of the foothills and the plains of Montana. So she lived there, I think, until she was about 11 years old. And from pretty much every person I've ever met who was born and spent significant time in Montana, you constantly hear that they, throughout the course of their life, had a draw back to the state. They had a desire or a magnetizing effect to come back to Montana. And my wife certainly had that. I was not born and raised in Montana. I was born and raised in Santa Cruz, California, which they consider to be Northern California. But if you look on a map, I'm pretty sure it's dead center as far as north-south. But I did live in Missoula, Montana for 4 years when I was younger. I think it was from maybe when I was 5 until 9 or 6 until 10. I was young enough that I remember that it snowed and I got in trouble throwing snowballs at a car a few times. So I had spent some time in Montana, not enough to have the same pull that my wife did. So we were living in California at the time, and California, by all rights, is an amazing state to live in, depending on how you view the state. If you're looking at it from a geography position, you're looking at it as an activity-based position. Maybe it's not so awesome to live when you start looking at a politically based argument. But I am very appreciative of the time that we spent there. I lived in California for, actually all but about 8 years of my life. And I truly enjoyed it. And my kids liked it. You know, they enjoy the beach, even though we didn't go that much. There was many, many great things about California. The big thing that got us to move, or got us the momentum moving in the right direction for us to move, is in 2016, we were the benefactors. By we, I mean my entire family were the benefactors or the recipients of an amazing gift to our family. We were gifted a trip to Scotland for the entire family, airfare and lodging, and we got to go and experience another country with my entire family for about 10 days. We had a driver and we did tours. It was absolutely amazing. And while we were out there, we were, again, I forget how it came up, but we were kind of just, again, searching the internet for something that fit our family better. And we found a picture of a house that was being used as a vacation rental by owner near Flathead Lake in Montana. And for people not familiar with the geography, Flathead Lake is a massive freshwater lake. It's actually the largest body of fresh water west of the Mississippi. It's up in the northwestern corner of Montana. Most people have heard of Bozeman and Missoula. Bozeman is east of Missoula. So as you're going from east to west, it's Bozeman, Missoula. And at Missoula, you start heading north and you run into a town called Kalispell. And then just north of that town is a town called Whitefish. We settled on Kalispell. I'll get to that point. That's where we live now. But while we were in Scotland, we found a house that was a vacation rental by owner near Flathead Lake. I don't know how we connected the dots. I don't even know what I was doing on Zillow at the time, but I found the exact same house via the same pictures on Zillow, and it was for sale. And my wife and I sat there and we looked at the pictures for hours and just kept scrolling through them, wondering if they could possibly be portraying the house and the land that it was on accurately. And we finally said, screw it. This just, for whatever reason, this seems to be right. One of the big reasons that we wanted to make an offer on the house is because our family was so impacted by the trip to Scotland that we wanted to find a place that we could do the same thing for other families and gift a stay at a house to another family that hopefully can have an impact on their life. So I found the real estate, the listing agent's information on Zillow and fired off an email and made an offer on the house, and they accepted. Now, I forgot to do some key steps before that, mostly pre-qualification and have enough money to buy the house, but I wasn't going to let those things stop me. So as soon as we got back from Scotland, I started, actually, while we were in Scotland, I was emailing back and forth, trying to get everything started. We scraped together every penny that we had put aside. I had to borrow money. It completely wiped us out to put an offer in on this house, especially when they said originally that 10% was going to be enough with the purchase price. And then as the loan processing went through, they said, ooh, yeah, by the way, about that 10%, we're going to need 20. So that was an interesting few days of beg, borrowing, and stealing. Light on the stealing, as in no stealing of the money, but doing everything we could. And putting everything into that house, and we finally were able to close on the house. And the beauty is we bought it as a VRBO. We still lived in Southern California, but we bought it with everything in the house so we could continue to use it as a VRBO. Closed in October of 2016. Spent the day my sons got out of school for winter break in San Diego. I picked them up. We got into the car and we drove from San Diego all the way into pretty much northern, not northern Idaho, but near the Montana border in one night. Woke up early and finished it, and we were at the house by the next day, covered in snow. Hallmark would make postcards out of how beautiful it was. The whole family was up there, had an amazing 3 weeks at that house, and when we got home, it just wasn't the same. So we started looking at it, and I literally wrote out a list of pros and cons of Montana versus California. The things that we really liked about California, or the reasons that we had that were anchoring us in California, was one, we owned a house, and two, we liked the schools that my children went to. My son at the time was at 7th grade. So we had some decisions to make, because if we were going to move, I wanted to move before he went into 8th grade so he could have 1 year of school in a new environment before the social experiment known as high school began. So it was a now or never moment, and we decided to pull the trigger. The housing problem, well, that's easy. You can sell your house, plus we were going to need to buy another house in Montana. And the schooling, arguably, I would say, actually it's not even a debate at this point. The schools here in Montana are better than the ones that our children were in San Diego. The home prices were lower, state taxes were lower, insurance rates were lower. Quality of living, I would say, absolutely went through the roof due to the fact that there's 4 clearly defined seasons, access to all of those seasons, and access to all of those activities, the lakes, the mountains, the plains, whatever it is that you want to do, you can see it outside of your window. And my favorite aspect, since we moved here, we crossed the border into Montana July 1st of this year, we were originally thinking we were going to move into the house we purchased as a VRBO, but it is the distance from the main town, I think, over time would slowly eat at you, especially when it comes to picking up groceries and taking kids to school. So we decided that we were going to look for a house in town. We found an amazing neighborhood that was close to the airport, so when I travel, it's convenient. My wife has 2 horses. It's 10 minutes for her. We're 10 minutes from my son's school and literally a 3-minute walk from my daughter's. And that's the way that it's going to be until they're completely through high school. Hard to beat that. So we decided to live into town, and now we have access to the house that's a VRBO, and we have the ability to offer it to other people and hopefully provide the same gift that was given to us. As far as my favorite aspect of living in Montana, so far, all I can say is that it feels smaller. I don't know how to describe it any other way than that. We lived in San Diego in a city or subdivision of San Diego called Chula Vista, and that subdivision had about 260,000 people living in it. And we moved to a city or a town here in Montana that has 26,000. The family's flourishing. I like the feel of a smaller town. I'm not a huge fan of the human race, so I don't have to interact with them except for when I want to. It just clicks for every aspect. The kids are flourishing, the family's doing well, and that's exactly what we hope for. And hopefully that answers the question of why it is we chose to move from California to the 406, the great state of Montana. Question number 5. It says, Jocko talks a lot about the importance of explaining why a task or action is beneficial and or describing how it will lead to success in the end. You, in turn, speak a lot about being the example for others. Within your own family, do you have stories of how you explain/teach the importance of being the example, or do you just set the example and let that be the lesson? So first, for people who don't know who Jocko is, his name is Jocko Willink. He has what I consider to be a very, very good podcast called The Jocko Podcast. Find it on iTunes, and he talks a lot about leadership and discipline and integrity and basically all of my favorite topics. He talks about them at a very refined level, and I absolutely recommend that you go check it out. Now, to answer the question, I 100% agree with Jocko. I do agree with explaining the why also. I have just been negligent in adding that when I discuss being the example. To get buy-in, whether it's from your coworkers or whether it's from your kids, I highly recommend verbalizing the importance or the benefit or the meaning of a concept, of a task or an action. Then you have to live your own words, which is another way of saying be the example. So I actually will make a point of referencing the explanation and the importance of that in the future, because I think it takes both. But as I've said before, really great words paired with subpar action gets you actually nowhere. It takes you backwards. You have to have both. You cannot say one thing and do another. So I do talk to my kids about the importance of physical training. And they also see me sweating. I would like to say every day, but it's not, because sometimes I take days off. But they see me making physical training an important aspect of my life. I talk to my kids about the importance of making reasonable and rational decisions. And paired with that, they need to see me doing those things on both my good days and, most importantly, my bad days, where I'm coming on the other side of the sine wave and I might be in a trough. I still have to live the words that I try to explain to my kids very often. I talk to my kids all the time about the importance of standing up for what is right, but they have to see it in action. And that's why the decision was made for me. In a previous podcast, I talked about a physical interaction that I got into in an attempt. Well, I guess it started off would be an attempt to defuse a situation, and then it became an attempt to help a police officer. But my decision to become involved in that was already solidified in concrete, because I can't tell my kids to do the right thing and to stand up for people who can't if I'm not willing to do it myself. You know, what lesson am I teaching to them if I say, hey, you need to stand up for people that can't stand up for themselves, and then allow an example of that to just walk by and do nothing? What does that do for my children? So not only do I try to set the example for my kids, I spend a ton of time talking with them and answering the questions that they have. You have to have both. Words have to be paired with the appropriate action to have the impact that you want them to. Question number 6. Do I have conversations with my children around fear and bravery? I love this question. I think this is a great question. I try to be 100% honest with my fears with my children. And not only with my fears, but with fear in general. For me, as a human being, my worst fear is that something will happen to my kids and I'm not going to either physically be there to help them, or I'll be unable to do something about it. And what I realized is that every day that they're alive, they are one day closer to spending less and less time with me, meaning the opportunity for something to happen to them where I'm not going to be there is increasing incrementally every single day that they're alive. So I look at my job, my sole purpose in job and life is to prepare them for when I'm not going to be there, which if you look at the story arc of a life of a human being, assuming you reach 80 years old, that's the vast majority of your life. You are outside of the home, out from under the wing of your parents. I hope they did a good job before that happened. So when it comes to fear and bravery, let's talk about bravery first. I don't even know necessarily how to define it. I went online and I looked at it, and it says mostly things about courage and valor. And I don't necessarily agree with that definition. To me, a better definition of bravery is doing the right thing regardless of the outside influences or situation. And I have been very fortunate in my life to have witnessed bravery firsthand many times. And what I'll say is this: none of the people who I would consider to embody courage or valor or bravery, none of those people went out looking for it. What happened is they were put into a situation and they stepped up and they did what they needed to do. They did what needed to be done in that moment. And was fear present? Yes, it was absolutely 100% present. Fear is an important thing. It's a warning sign to yourself that, hey, you might be facing grave danger here. Perhaps this situation, whatever it may be, needs to be paid a little bit more attention. So fear was absolutely present in those environments, but it wasn't controlling. Experiencing fear is completely natural. How you deal with that fear is what you have control over. So I don't focus on talking to my kids about bravery. I focus on talking to them about doing the right thing. Every day, and I know I've said this and I'm sorry if it's a broken record, but every day when I drop my kids off at school, whether it's my daughter or whether it's my two sons, as they're opening the door to get out of the car, I say, hey guys, stand up for what you believe in. Protect each other and do the right thing. All I could ask for from my sons or my daughter, and actually my daughter embodies this sometimes even more than my sons do, is that they could stand up for what they believe, that they think before they act, and that when they see somebody who can't stand up for themselves or can't speak for themselves, they step in and take action to help that person do so. Those are the kids that I want to raise. And the best way that I can create that in them or shine a light on the importance of that or highlight how important it is in their life is through my actions, not through my words. Question number 7. I am about to become a father. First and foremost, congratulations. What habits did you find to help you stay on track with fitness and life in general? So shortly after congratulations, I would say to you, stand by for a wild and interesting ride. And I mean that in only the best way. I think anybody who is a parent would agree that it can be a painful road at times, but it's by far the most amazing journey that I've ever been on. My kids are getting a little bit older now. So I would say in some areas it's easy. I'd say you have the same amount of worry and concern and problems. They just become more complicated as the children, whether it be boy or girl, get older. But I distinctly remember when I could fit, my son in the palm of my hand, the first days that he was born and the years after that until now. I can't have a hard time believing my oldest son in 10 months is going to be turning 15 and teaching him how to drive. Kind of blows my mind. But I found when my children were younger that I had a better capacity to be a parent when I took care of myself, which is not revelatory in any way, shape, or form. The better place that you're in, the better you're going to be able to deal with just about everything, whether it's children or occupation. So what I focused on as I was looking for balance, I had to ask myself, especially when it came to how much time I was going to dedicate to training, what is it that I was training for? And what I realized is that, especially in the early years, I needed to focus more just on maintenance. I got my workouts in where I could get them in, and I created time. I would say find the time, but if you can find more than 24 hours in a day, please hit me up. I would say instead of try to find the time, create the time for you to get the physical release that you need in low or no impact areas. And with that, you need to be ready to squeeze it in when you can. Early mornings seemed to work for me, and sometimes it was late at night though, and everywhere in between. Sometimes mama would be laying down with the baby, and I had 30 minutes where I could squeeze something in. And if that's all I could get, generally I would work out more than that if I had the choice. I would be at the gym for a couple hours if given the opportunity. But at that phase of my life, I took advantage of the 30 minutes and I got it in where I could and just realized, hey, I'm just trying to keep enough water out of this boat, so I'm not going to sink and I'm not going to rise. We're just working on maintenance. So I was at like nap time, early AM and late night. Now, as a father, the reality is that children don't need much from the father for the first few years, especially if you're going to breastfeed or your wife is going to breastfeed the baby. You're going to be able to help out with diapers and maybe do a little bit of formula. Other than that, I found that, the babies, they want their mother, and I don't blame them. So you might have a little bit more leverage in your time, but the only advice that I can give you when it comes to your time management and prioritization is that whatever decisions you're going to make them off of being there to support your wife or significant other. Because like I said, the kids don't need too much from dad in those early years, but they need a ton from mom. So be there for mama. I'd say guard your energy levels and maximize your rest when you can get it in. Some of the best naps of my life have been 20-minute naps in the middle of the day. I would rather do that than go get a cup of coffee and then just feel like garbage at the end of the day. So guard your energy levels, take the naps when you can, and then tune out the distractions. Anything that doesn't help you support mom or the baby or yourself, consider getting rid of it. And you should read that as social media and anything that wastes your time. Question number 8. Any good Killcliff recipes for alcoholic beverages? I've been waiting for this question my whole life. If you drink, hey, if you don't drink, awesome. I woke up one day and I took 2 years off of drinking. I don't know exactly why I did that, but I did. And I fully support people who choose not to drink for whatever the reason may be. But if you choose to drink and you want an interesting little cocktail, Killcliffs actually make a great mixer. And I don't know if anybody else has had this experience before. A thorough night of drinking with Red Bull and vodka, waking up the next morning with a resting heart rate in the mid 100s is not awesome. And one of the biggest misconceptions I think people have about Killcliff is they assume it's an energy drink, where it is not. I think there's 15 milligrams of caffeine in the beverage. There is some caffeine in there, but if I was to start a company, the last company I would ever choose, or category I would ever choose to start a company in, would be the beverage company. Because I know how I am when I'm going into a grocery store or a gas station. You get about 2 seconds, and that 2 seconds, all I'm doing is scanning for what it is that I know that I want, and then I'm taking off. So people see Killcliff sometimes near or in the same case as the Red Bull, and they think it's exactly the same thing. It's not. So if you do pair your drinking activities with Killcliff, I'm not saying it's a magic pill or a magic recipe, but I have found that I don't have that ridiculous racing heart rate the next morning, and it actually takes a little bit of the edge off because there's a lot of vitamins and minerals in there. All that aside, if you want to pair something up, my personal favorites are the Blood Orange with Tito's vodka and Tito's vodka with the Black Raspberry. Both of those things are delicious little treats. And I also, when we were in Georgia, we created an old-fashioned, I think is the correct way to say that, which I'm not even sure what goes in there, but I know Dud put in there a splash of the Blood Orange, and it was delightful. So those would be my top 3 that I would go with. Blood Orange, Black Raspberry and vodka, and then old-fashioned with a splash of Blood Orange. All right, coming to the end here, people. Last question, or the question before the last question. Number 9, do good habits become the seeds of discipline? I don't know. I actually look at this one as very close to being the chicken or the egg, because I believe that both benefit and develop each other. To begin with, you might need discipline to kickstart yourself into those good habits. You're going to need it to change your behavior until it becomes a habit. But once that good behavior becomes a habit, it's going to make it easier to maintain your discipline because you are conditioned to doing the things that help with your discipline and keeping you on that path that you're going. So I don't know, but I recommend both. I recommend good habits, and I recommend discipline, and I recommend chasing after things that are difficult and doing things that challenge you both physically and emotionally. And for success in both of those, I think good habits and discipline walk hand in hand. So I don't know. Whoever asked that, I don't know which one to start with, and I don't know which one gives birth to the other. Just try to have both. Final question. Am I able to sit and watch a military movie? What I should do right now is go get my wife and throw the headset on her and ask her that question and then swing the microphone over, because I'm pretty sure her reaction would be hilarious. She is unwilling to sit down and watch any war-themed or military-related movie with me because I can't help myself. I get pissed. They're created for entertainment, and I know that most people look at it only as entertainment. But just like I am sure that firefighters laugh at Chicago Fire and police officers laugh at the Chips movie or whatever, fill in the blank. If there's a theatrical representation of the career field that you call home as an occupation, it's going to be difficult to watch something that is turned into a movie about it. Now, there are some great movies, But even the small things stick out to me in great movies. A good example of that is the movie Sicario, which is a awesome movie. But there is a huge error, a technical error in the scene where they are coming back across the border or getting ready to come back across the border and they get into the firefight in the traffic. And you can only see it for a second, but if you know what you're looking for, it jumps out at you. And as soon as I see that, it changes my perception of the movie because it breaks that sense of reality. Or I'm sorry, it breaks that sense of suspended reality and brings me back because I'm looking at it from a tactical and technical perspective, and I just can't get past that. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it changes the experience for me. So go watch Sicario, go watch the Border Patrol scene, and hit me up when you can find out or figure out what is wrong. You only see it for a second, but it's right there staring you in the face if you know what you're looking for. And that is all I got for today. Next week, I'm actually going to be on the road. I'm going to be the guest on somebody else's podcast. So I will probably, instead of creating one of my own, even though I'm traveling with the gear, probably will just retweet the podcast that I'm on. So until then, thank you everybody for the questions. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you everybody for supporting the podcast through the sweatshirts and the t-shirts and all of that stuff. I have a new order of sweatshirts that's actually coming next week because almost all the sizes are out. And I also think next week we're going to have one new item, one final item in the old Cleared Hot podcast store. Get them while they're hot. That's all I can say.